Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa called on indigenous and traditional leaders to play a greater role in the development of rural economies. The Deputy President was delivering the closing speech of a two-day Indaba and Boksburg Ekurhuleni. In addressing the delegates, Ramaphosa said that government had crafted a vision of traditional leadership that embraces transformation. He also said that traditional leaders are well positioned to champion the issue of social cohesion and better service delivery. On the issue of rural education, the Deputy President said that leaders should be worried if a rural school does not do as well as its urban counterpart.
Life revolves around the economy, and your task over the ages has been precisely to advance the lives of our people, to improve their prospects in life, and to make sure that our communities do progress and move ahead.
ANC Treasury General touched on the issue of the land held in trust, an agenda point that dominated discussion at the conference.
More land needs to be made available to our people. Where the 13% that we're talking about, the biggest problem is the fact that the numbers of people who occupy that land have increased, and therefore there's a lot of overcrowding, making that area to be obviously less productive, and more land requirements have arisen.
Let's get the latest details now. For that, we are joined by NSM reporter Nomusa Pangula, joins us live from Boksburg. Good afternoon to you, Nomusa. We've heard from a number of speakers this morning into this afternoon, the likes of the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa. Just talk us through some of the major issues and some of the key points we've heard so far today.
Well, thank you so much, Abigail. It has been a very lengthy 5 days for the traditional leaders. You'll remember that the first ever Indaba in the democratic state started on Monday, where traditional leaders were discussing matters that are of interest to them, as well as societies that it is in their jurisdiction. But however, today, when we were listening to the presentation of the Deputy President, as well as the Treasurer General of the ANC, they touched on the matter that has been at the center of the discussions throughout the 5 days, which is the matter of land. Traditional leaders have been saying since day one that they want the 13% land that is held in trust by the government on their behalf to be given back to them with immediate effect. Luckily today, Abigail, traditional leaders managed to give a declaration with the time frames as to when do they exactly want that land to be transferred back to them, because at the end of the day, the land is already gazetted. It's only the 87% remaining that needs to be audited and make sure that it is distributed to the relevant people. However, to elaborate more on the reaction of the traditional leaders in terms of the speech of the Deputy President of the country, as well as the Treasurer General of the African National Congress, I am joined by Inkosi Sipho Mahlangu, who is the Deputy National Chairperson of the National House of Traditional Leaders. Inkosi Mahlangu, it's been 5 days, you've deliberated, you've heard what the Deputy President said, committing the government to make sure that they assist you in getting all these recommendations that you have put forward to make sure that it is done and people get the land that they deserve. What is your reaction to his speech?
I think this has been a very groundbreaking achievement by the institution. There's always been this feeling that the Minister of Rural Development has been made to become an extension of the former Native Land Commissioner in the white apartheid government, where land will be held in trust for us as if we don't have capabilities as the institution to hold our land with our own communities on our own. So the pronouncements that have been made by government have been very welcome by the institution, and that 13% of the land that is in the hands of traditional leaders currently will be transferred into traditional councils. We've agreed with government that, since the 1913 Act was abolished, there was no reason for the minister to continue holding this land in trust for us as traditional leaders. So we've given government 6 months that if there are no legislative imperatives, within 6 months that land must be transferred back. But if there has to be a legislative process where there is consultations and all those, we are giving them 2 years because we believe that that land will not have opposition from our rural communities. Opposition might come from these neoliberal structures that are normally led by academics and academic institutions. That's where you normally find resistance, and those are not people that are living in rural areas. They'll just have 1 or 2 people in rural areas that they will plant to be able to object to what we want. But if people would go down and talk to people that are residing in rural communities, they'll get the true facts, because rural communities are there because they've been allocated that land by traditional councils, and there are no traditional councils that are going around and removing people from the land that they've been given.
Now, Khoshi, the issue of CPAs rather, has been at the top of the discussions throughout the 5 days. Where does this now put the CPAs as well as the trust that have been created in order to safeguard this land for the traditional leaders? What are we going to see happening now? Are we going to see traditional leaders working hand in hand with the CPAs as well as the trust that have been there, or what is going to happen now?
I think the problem with CPAs mainly has been that they create a community within a community. So we are saying where there are traditional councils. A traditional council is an organ of state. It is not a council that is owned by a traditional leader. It's a council that is owned by government and the people of South Africa. So if you are saying the structure that is owned by its people, it's not a structure that can truly receive land, then we are fooling ourselves, because CPAs are a structure that has been created through an act of parliament, but it's still they've been given more preference by government. And we found that in more often than not, there's always infightings. The land there is lying fallow, nothing happens on that land. The houses that were there have been vandalized, and some of the land has been sold to different people. So now we are saying we do not want CPAs on traditional community lands. And where land has been taken away from a traditional community with its own people, we are saying land must be returned back to the community in its entirety. It should not be returned to a group that are said to be beneficiaries, either as 5 people that form a CPA or a trust and all those, because that creates problems within the community. If government wants to do that, they must buy land for those people that want to farm on their own. But if that land belongs to a community, it has to be given a community so that it benefits everybody within the community, not just a select few.
Now, lastly, Ndaba, in terms of now the legislature, understanding that you can't do all of this without having authority to do so, don't you perhaps think that a legislature could have been at the top, on top of your list of your demands to government, perhaps, since we are looking at all political parties going to their policy conferences, so that they are able to consider all these recommendations in terms of legislature that you have?
Fortunately, this conference has been structured in a way that political parties have been invited, so they come and discuss with us, so that they come and listen to what the institution is saying, and the discussions that we had here are going to form part of policy conferences of different political parties that were here. 2, there was a commission, because within the institution you've got advocates, you've got professors, you've got all sorts of highly educated people that are capable of analyzing legislation. So we took each and every legislation that deals with traditional leaders, and we took it into pieces and came up with our own recommendations in relation to what needs to be happening in relation to legislation. We've also looked at legislation that...
Well, thank you so much, Khoshi. Unfortunately, due to time, I'll have to stop you there. And indeed, as Khoshi was saying, that part of the commissions that we're discussing here at the Indaba, we're also discussing the issue of legislature, which will give powers that are definitely defined or clearly defined for Amakhosi as to where exactly do their powers start and where exactly do they end. But unfortunately, some of the political parties could not come and join this Indaba, particularly the Economic Freedom Fighters as well as the Democratic Alliance, which was a huge disappointment for the traditional leaders. However, the Indaba continued and the declarations were made. Back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Namusa. Let's leave it there for now. ANN7 reporter Namusa Pungula coming to us from the Indigenous and Traditional Leaders Indaba, currently taking place in Boksburg. Stay tuned to ANN7 for the latest details and developments here.